this half. Get the chat back up. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I was just thinking, has anyone got any, we're talking about all this being very subjective and very personal. Has anyone got any things which they sort of find beautiful or very aesthetically pleasing, which aren't the sort of, which they feel is a bit strange or a bit weird or a bit unusual? I suppose I'm trying to think of me, but I think I do, old, rusty old sort of like, I don't know, rusty old industrial artifacts and things like that in fields, things like that, very beautiful, very, very aesthetically pleasing. I suppose old things that are sort of decayed. But again, that just, to me, that just seems like, yeah, they just are beautiful. But I know a lot of people don't think they are. What else? Steelworks and stuff like that. Yeah, okay, Jasmine, that's good, isn't it? No, you're right. Well, we'll come on to that. That's like a wabi-sabi thing, isn't it? So imperfections have more character, so I find beauty in things that yeah, okay. Yeah, so perfection is not, yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Definitely. So thanks. Yeah, that's interesting. Anyone else got any things, any sort of way that they appreciate, which is kind of like not it's difficult, isn't it? Because we're visual people. Because we're visual people, everything's kind of fascinating, isn't it? We're always looking for something interesting or beautiful or surprising or, I don't know. Yeah, so probably we're in a sort of bit of a bubble. People who are like, this aesthetics are our thing. So, but be an interesting question to ask people who aren't in this world, maybe. Anyone else got any things which they find beautiful, which are kind of not outside the expected, I guess? No. Okay, right, let's move on then. So the second section, yeah, theories of aesthetics. It's not all about theories, but that's a biggish part of it. So yeah, there have been several attempts to construct theories of aesthetics, and here's Aristotle. So and this is a really obviously an early attempt. So beauty depends on size as well as symmetry. No very small animal can be beautiful. For looking at it takes so small a portion of time that the impression will be confused. Nor can any very large one, for a whole view of it cannot be had at once, and so there will be no unity and completeness. So he's having a go, and I think he was a very clever man, but I think this kind of like a little bit. So yeah, he's basically saying it's about function and proportion. Yeah, which I'm not sure. But then Kant is a theory, I guess, which has lasted longer. Immanuel Kant sought to clarify what aesthetics meant by, he wrote a critique of judgment. He tried to work out how to analyze beauty as well as taste. So taste is an interesting idea. So that's not to my taste. So that's a way of sort of saying, well, it might be very beautiful or very interesting, but it's not to my taste. So that's, again, that owning the subjectivity of this. And Kant sort of, this idea of enjoyment. Pleasure arises from safe sensation, but judging something to be beautiful has a third requirement. Sensation must give rise to pleasure by engaging reflective contemplation. So that is quite interesting, I think. So you kind of you get a sensation from something. So you look at something and there's a sensation, there's a feeling, an emotional response or whatever, but then there needs to be reflective contemplation. And trying to sort of identify what that is, I think, is quite tricky, because I think thinking is not necessarily it. Is it? If you see something that's there's a pleasure or whatever, and then you think about it, I'm not sure. I think it's an emotional contemplation, almost a feeling the emotion of that moment, I guess, is what he's trying to get at. Yeah. So Kant thought that judgments of beauty are sensory, emotional, and intellectual. So that's the important thing. Three things. So you've got a sensory impact based around, you know, a lot of those things we talked about, the formal elements. We've got an emotional connection, and an intellectual one. And that, I think that's it's certainly a more complex sort of way of looking at beauty, isn't it? But I don't know. I mean, I'm going to show you later on some things that I find beautiful in arts and culture, a few things, and I'm not sure how much the intellectual comes into it. I don't know. Any thoughts from you guys about that? I mean, I kind of think the sensory and the emotional are probably prominent. The intellectual, doesn't that add something else? I don't know. How do you feel? Anyone got any thoughts on Kant's theory of the three factors? It's a bit much to put in the chat, I suppose. It's like, yeah. Anyway, put something in if you can think of anything to say about that. But he thus concluded there's no scientific rule, subjective in the eye of the beholder. So this is where that sort of comes from, which is absolutely fine. This is Carl Andre's equivalent 8 bricks. You know, at the time when it was exhibited in the UK, it was like worthless, ugly. These are just a load of bricks. You know, we see them every day on houses. I work on a building site. They're horrible things. I hate them. You know, but then a lot of people in the creative world were like, no, this is a, you know, a lot of people in the creative world were like, well, it's a classic example of like subtle minimalism, use of the grid, aesthetic, form, color, texture. It's got all that stuff, you know, out of the most humble of kind of objects. So yeah. Jasmine says, I think beauty is too hard to define. It's not any one thing. Yeah, okay. So that's what. So agreeing there with Kant's the sensory, emotional, intellectual all sort of feeding together. Yeah. I mean, I love the bricks. I think it's beautiful. But again, there's so much stuff, context around it. You know, on the gallery space with the light and it's beautiful. I think if you just stuck it in my back garden, it probably wouldn't be. So there's that aura of the artwork in a gallery as well, which adds to it. So yeah, I think Jasmine's completely right. Too many things to be able to pin it down. So a few other sort of theories would be this idea of the sublime. And that's me. I definitely find beauty in the sublime, and that's a good way of describing it. So terms such as darkness, obscurity, vastness, magnificent, loudness, suddenness, a kind of pleasurable terror. So yeah, I mean, power stations, steelworks, I love those things. I find them very, very beautiful. And they're, you know, because they're sort of huge and vast and, you know, sort of threatening, really. During the 18th and 19th century, the sublime was associated with the immensity or turbulence of nature and human responses, particularly represented by the Romantics. And here's Caspar David Friedrich's very famous wander above the sea of fog. So Gabriella's saying, I think it's the context that can make something beautiful. It can change the way we view something and our opinion of it. Yeah, completely. So we, that, like I was saying, with the art piece in the gallery, it's also, yeah, when you're traveling or in a certain location and something happens there and it's, when it happens somewhere else, it's not the same. Or when you see something there and somewhere different, yeah, the context is very, very important. The context completely. So that's a sublime, which I think I definitely, that theory that I can kind of connect to. Okay, and then we move on to this idea of the contemporary sublime. So contemporary artists have extended the idea of the sublime by looking back to early traditions and by engaging with aspects of modern society. This is Anish Kapoor's huge Marsyas, which was in the Turbine Hall in 2002. So we're talking about the sublime, not just only in the vastness of nature, but in terms of modern science and awesome complexity, capitalist industrial system and technology. Let's be talking about my power stations and how kind of beautiful I find them. Huge airliners, although I kind of find them beautiful, but then when we get back to when the intellect kicks in, it's like, hold on, no, this is ridiculous. This is a horrible thing. But there is that sensory wow sort of thing. So yeah, working on different levels. And here's Justin Lovato's fantastic artist. Just love these. They're awesome, they're magnificent. There's sort of like this scale and grandness, which is sort of threatening but beautiful and kind of like disturbing, but also very beautiful. And I think maybe that's when the intellect and the emotions are sort of grappling. So I think, yeah, beautiful, maybe just intriguing or stimulating is another way of looking at it. Gursky's Shanghai, his photographs are seen as the contemporary sublime. The vastness of humanity, construction, and the insignificance of the human in relation to the vast things that the human makes. We'd call that an example of the contemporary sublime. So there are aesthetic movements as well. So put labels onto them. So we'll just go through a few of those now. We've got the genres based around things like minimalism, the minimalist aesthetic, like the Carl Andre bricks, machine aesthetic, Fernand Léger on the left, sort of quite hard lines and blocked in colors and patterns and quite rigid. A lot of the things in the works. Bohemian aesthetic, which we'll have a look at in a minute. Postmodern aesthetic, steampunk aesthetic, Japanese wabi-sabi aesthetic, which we'll look at in a moment, which I think Jasmine was kind of hinting at. So here's the steampunk aesthetic, yeah? Again, we can kind of like, when we go back to our formal elements, we can kind of see the ones which are the colour. So there's a lot of beige, there's a lot of muted colours, no strong colours sticking out. A lot of texture, especially in the clothes. Form, there's a lot of lines as well in terms of the industrial aspect of the aesthetic here. And there's the sublime, I think, stuck in there. These monumental sort of mountains and factories and stuff like that. There's a whole range of factors coming together to create an aesthetic sort of formula, if you like. We could do that with all of those. Bohemian aesthetic, which is based around like coming from that 60s sort of counterculture, traveling to India and sort of like hanging out in these rooms, these interior spaces away from the heat, and so greens and yellows and sort of textures in terms of mats and wicker, and then the tie-dye sort of dress and the sort of like just thrown on, messy hair, this sort of aesthetic. So again, we do have formal elements as factors which create these aesthetics. And here's the wabi-sabi one, which I find, which is particularly interesting for me, that idea of imperfection. And this one in particular, that I think it's got another name apart from wabi-sabi, but that idea of filling in cracks with like a gold solder, almost a gold mend. So you're turning the cracks into something very, very beautiful using a certain precious material. And here we can see this plant here. It's just a bit sad. It's kind of like wilting a bit. It's not full of flowers. It's mainly branch. A slightly irregular pot. There's just a lack of perfection in all of it, but there's a definite beauty in there. Yeah, one of my particular favorite aesthetics. Okay, cultural notions. So we've got some theories, cultural notions of beauty. It's varied over time and across cultures, yeah. And obviously women have been the subject of the powerful male gaze. That's often defined notions of beauty within cultures. Capitalist societies and associated media have been prominently promoting and fixing their idea of beauty. Yeah, we can't, deny that capitalist culture drives certain ideas in order to make money, and that idea of what we want, what we like and what we want is kind of like part of what has come out of this. And the media are very, very responsible for that. But since the world has opened up due to the connectivity of the internet, Western ideas of beauty have been attached to wealth and happiness and became desirable in other cultures. So those ideas have spread slowly to other cultures. In ancient Egypt, this is the tomb of Nakht, depicting 3 women preparing for a feast. Ancient Egyptians used things like henna and kohl to color their hair and skin. Early examples of makeup, body adornment, changing the body to make it more appealing or to other people, or to make a statement. Ancient Rome, of course, we had different ideas there. The pure white skin, the sign of the leisure class, the most important feature of Roman beauty. And that is kind of like, gosh, that has permeated media, hasn't it, over the years, and certain cultures being the standout kind of quality. Native Roman women weren't naturally fair-skinned, spent their time outside with oils, using whitening makeup to fit their model of beauty. So even going back, we can see these sort of formulas, these standards being set, people trying to conform to them. And we can look at the Kayan people as an example. And there have been lots of ideas about why these neck coils were worn by Kayan women. One suggestion is that the coils give the woman resemblance to a dragon, an important figure in Kayan folklore. So these ideas of beauty come back from folklore, from stories, from cultures, histories. The Kayan women, when they're asked, acknowledge various ideas, often say their purpose for wearing the rings is cultural identity. So it's part of their culture. And they're sticking to it, and they're keeping it going. And in their culture, it's considered beautiful and impressive. And here's the Kayapo people. The Kayapo people they're an endangered community of the Amazon, use body paint, piercings, tattoos, and different hairstyles to distinguish social age and class, find partners, and identify with heritage and nature. So, they're aesthetically very beautiful, but there's a lot of sort of history and intellect and thinking and going on in terms of what's chosen. And this is an interesting thing as well. To help their way through the forest, Kayapo paint their legs with red pigment that rubs off on the surrounding terrain. So it's also got their body paint and stuff has a sort of practical use as well. Well, that leads us, doesn't it, to tattooing, which is very, very prominent in Western culture now. And here we can see some of the earlier examples of tattooing the Bontoc warrior from 1908, and then a Japanese, going back a long time within Japanese culture, tattooed bodies are very, very prominent in Japanese culture. And yeah, often connected with ceremonial rites and passages in most cultures throughout the world, to mark special events, pay honor, respect, or simply as a form of body art. So I think more these rites and passages, these kind of like rituals are less common now. So tattooing has just become more a form of body adornment. Very, very widespread. And since the 1970s, tattoos have become a mainstream part of global and Western fashion, common among both sexes, all economic classes and age groups, from the later teen years to middle age. And here's a range of Amy Winehouse with her famous tattoos on her upper arm, and people with different ones here. Yeah, so in the West, it's become a practice that has crossed social boundaries, low to high class, reshaping the power dynamics regarding gender. So that's interesting too. So there's more of a, we've got all those things combined, haven't we? Aesthetics, we've got sociological kind of perspective. That's the sort of intellectual bit that Kant's talking about. Yeah, so aesthetics, design tied up with a lot of other kind of contexts. So we'll talk a bit now about the sort of thorny subject, I guess, of beauty in Western mainstream media and fashion. Here's what I find a rather depressing photograph of a magazine rack, which is just, oh gosh, covered with photographs of a certain type of woman, white, youngish white, conforming to a very kind of narrow idea of people. So it is, yeah. And so we're seeing, aren't we, here? It's dominated by images of young white women, conforming to this cultural idea of beauty. And magazine covers and adverts prioritize these representations. And there has recently been a lot of controversy, not recently, but over the last 20 years, I suppose, 10, 50, 20 years, much controversy over the use of overly thin models in advertising, and particularly on the catwalk. I mean, there are signs post-Me Too, this is slowly beginning to change, and ethical representational issues around diversity are being more seriously addressed. However, there was a report the other day saying that the average size of models featured in fashion advertising has dropped again after going up a little way. It's now dropped back down again. Not as far as it was, but still gone down, which isn't great. So yeah, what we're basically saying, isn't it, that certainly within the West, in capitalism, the media has such a strong part in putting out there what we should look at and what we should find beautiful. Yeah. Obviously there are reactions to this, and companies have tried, to fight this. And this is the Barbour limited edition set of Perfect Glow ampoules in collaboration with 6 female Nashville musicians. So these are famous Nashville American musicians from left to right. The packaging features a photograph of the recording artists because they encapsulate the very idea of empowerment, diversity, and confidence. So it's trying to get over that idea that beauty is not just what we're looking at. Although, gosh, the 6 women do kind of conform to kind of an idea of beauty in Western culture, I think. I don't think they're much far outside of that. We're still looking at beauty as being about their capabilities as musicians and performers, and those extra qualities which they have, rather than just what they look like. Okay, so there has been an attempt to try and move this forward. And two more attempts here, two more quite well-known campaigns, which have tried to move against traditional forms of representation of women in the media. The Dove campaign on the left, which features larger size models with different skin colors, different ages, and then the famous Love cover, issue number 1, Love, going back a few years now, with Beth Ditto on the cover, who doesn't conform to those kind of like smaller size models which are so prominent in the media. So there have been some high profile campaigns which have tried to address this issue. Yeah, the Beth Ditto one was 2009. But obviously still the main drive within advertising does still show women of a particular size and from a particular culture. And this is This Girl Can campaign from Sport England in 2015, which won lots of awards. So trying to address the stereotypes. Yeah, it won many awards. So again, it's not just about the look, it's about what that conforms to. It's about qualities other than that. And this is the big question, isn't it? You know, is beauty, gosh, it's stuck in an idea, isn't it, of I suppose classical form in many ways, but is beauty also in qualities, people's qualities, what they bring to the table, what they bring to the community, what they bring to society? So broadening out that idea of what is beautiful, but maybe beautiful is the wrong word. And recently, obviously, this has been proliferated, this issue, because of the use of beauty filters, which are readily available, as we know, on all cameras and all post photographic processing on phones. That simple click of a filter can change one into something very, very different. And there's been a backlash against this recently, hasn't there, where filters are being limited, I think, or trying to. I think it's going to be pretty hard myself to stop this bandwagon. But we know, don't we, that certain age groups are very, very vulnerable within social media. So we can see this drive continuing. Yeah. So just to sum up a bit here, clearly, what is considered aesthetically pleasing or beautiful is very subjective, culturally coded, and in the eye of the beholder. There do, though, continue to be rightly or wrongly subjects onto which we apply value judgments, and these include, artworks, obviously, as we talked about, context where beautiful things exist, architecture, public sculptures, we expect them to be beautiful or pleasing. Gardens, yeah. I mean, I'm talking here about things kind of which are, gardens. Cars are still attached a certain value and beauty to them. Jewelry, diamonds, jewels, stones, those kind of things. Bodies. So these are still the things that we generally apply these judgments to. And yeah, they're very, very fixed, aren't they? I think the issue is it's very, very slow to change this, and we still are very much within this kind of like, it's stuck within cultures, it's stuck within thinking. Yeah, very interesting. Clothes, clothes as well. All of these things have complex meanings, I suppose. So I'm just going to finish off by, I mean, I was thinking when I was putting this together, I was thinking, what is it that I find? Why am I attracted to certain things within visual culture and not others? Why do I find some things like I'm trying to pick apart what it is that actually. So here's a few examples. So I find Tarkovsky's Stalker, the film from 1979, like beautiful from start to finish. Every frame is just absolutely lovely. And I think if I pick it apart with Kant, it is, I mean, there's an aesthetic, color, all that sort of thing. There's that sublime, the power of things like the power station, or that keeps cropping up. There's something about nature, that kind of like the beauty of nature. So there are several complicated things going on at the same time, and it's not just, you try and say, is it beauty or not? I mean, I suppose it's just like an emotional kind of like, engagement, isn't it? An emotional attachment, and that's as Kant says. I think it's kind of sensory, but it's also emotional, but it's also a bit intellectual actually as well. Although I find that difficult to verbalize. Agnes Martin's paintings, everyone I look at, I just think they're all absolutely beautiful. I think there's a bit of the imperfection thing going on. They're never quite perfect. They're always like quite handmade, it feels, although in a very sort of like controlled way. There's a sort of bit of maths and industry. So there's definitely some intellectual thing because they're maths grids type work. So there's an intellectual element. Aesthetically, they're very, very simple. And I think it's also a lot to do with understanding her, like knowing about her. So there's an intellectual thing about knowing about her life and what she's done and the sort of person she was, So there's that feeding in as well, the sort of intellectual bit. So yeah, definitely working on all levels. And George Shaw's paintings, again, which I just love. And I don't think again, a lot of people would look at it and think, oh, it's a grubby old picture of a telephone box. So there is definitely a difference between, how different people look at this and how they appreciate it. For me, it's like there's definitely something about beauty in the everyday. So, there's a bit of the romance of the phone box, isn't there? I think these are the sort of places I used to hang out when I was a child as well. These sort of backyards and sort of like grimy areas on the edge of estates, sort of thing. I think that's where I used to kind of hang out. So I think there's a historical thing going on there. I mean, aesthetically, yeah, there's a lot of lovely aesthetics, red against green and all of that. But there is definitely that kind of thing that you can't quite define. And I think maybe that's something. But Van Gogh, of course, absolutely love Van Gogh's work aesthetically. But again, I think it's a kind of, there's definitely an intellectual aspect, which is kind of like knowing about him, his story, and his state of mind, and all the writings and the baggage about that. I think that feeds into, imagining him there doing it, feeling it, and feeling it with him adds to that appreciation. And I think these are things are all like, we'd call it like appreciation, wouldn't we? Or fascination or joy or whatever from looking. And, there are different things feeding into that: aesthetic, emotional, and intellectual. I think I agree with Kant. I think it seems to make a lot of sense. Okay, that's a bit about what I like to look at, me trying to work out why. Anyone got, come on, let's finish off with, anyone got any particular artworks that they find particularly beautiful, and any reasons why? Why you think that might be? based on some of the things we've talked about. Anyone got any? I'll give you a couple of minutes to think of one. Yeah, good one, Jasmine. So Klimt, yeah, gold. Okay, so that's something that I guess is not featured. A really good point. So precious metals, yeah, that's something that should be in this lecture, really. They often feature as something that we find beautiful: silver and gold, jewels and glitter. Um, because they're precious, because they're worth money, or because it kind of like, I've heard that they kind of like these shiny things sort of represent a different consciousness or a different dimension, some sort of spiritual place. So yeah, Klimt, pattern and color. So you're talking about aesthetics there. Yeah. Um, yeah, good one. Khadijah's saying clothes from different cultures. I think that's absolutely right. Yeah, completely. When I've been to some very different cultures, just fascinated by just everyday clothes that people are wearing, and they're like, "What? This is just what we wear." And I'm like, "Well, that's just beautiful, that cloth or that beige or that color." Yeah, no, absolutely. So that shows a cultural thing, doesn't it? Definitely. Yeah, Gabriella's on my wavelength here. Yeah, Van Gogh, Starry Night, composition, the colors, paint and brush strokes, movement, that energy. Yeah, photography that features decay, untraditional. Yeah, so the everyday or photographing. Yeah, definitely like peeling paint, that sort of thing. Rust. That's always a winner, isn't it? That really is. Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's good. You're on my wave. Well, you're all on my wavelength. Gold is great, isn't it? And sparkly rocks, different shaped rocks. You have form. Um, yeah, that's an interesting one. Why is it that form rocks is so really does hit us, doesn't it? And look at that phrase. That's really nice. The forms. Sparkly, sparkly rocks. I like it. Great. Yeah. So these are really interesting comments because they show. I'm looking at all of them, thinking, yeah, I find those very beautiful too, and very aesthetically pleasing. Definitely fits to my world. Um, Great. Okay, everyone. Well, we'll finish there. But that was really there's a lot of stuff in there. My head's spinning when I do this one because I'm never really sure um, if we've made any sense of it. But yeah, it's obviously a perennial sort of perennial interest, isn't it? This sort of subject, particularly how things change which again something probably a different lecture, but ideas of beauty change over periods of time. And we're in a very different place now. When still some things, you know, maintain like the flowers or whatever, and new things come in that are beautiful depending on the time we're living in. Anyway, great to see you all. Thanks for coming. 2 weeks time, we're doing art and music, which is always fun. So I look forward to seeing you there. Gabriella got you thinking. Yeah, maybe too much. I'm thinking too much now. I need to go and sit in a darkened room. Yeah, cheers, guys. Nice. Thanks for your comments. Always useful. Take care of yourselves. See you in a couple of weeks. Bye.